Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. Listen, let me tell you about live streaming for a minute. If you haven't been on a live stream, we're streaming live across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And while you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, that will help us do more of these. And it'll give you the notification when we produce the YouTube premiere of this epic interview that we're about to do. Live streaming lets you peek into the studio as we do an epic taping with a guest. And man, we have a great guest on today. And I believe he's coming all the way from Cabo San Lucas. Let me tell you what he's doing in the green room. He's sitting on a stool about this big. His trainer has a sponge and he's sopping his head with a bunch of water because he's overheating. He's putting some Vaseline under his eyes so those gloves slide off his face. Well, not really. Dave Scholten is in the green room. He's an MMA fighter. He's looking to go back in the ring at age 50. And man, what a story this guy has. We connected. And before I bring on Dave, I want to tell you what I think of Dave. Yesterday, I had a meltdown, and I don't talk about my show this way, but Dave and I were scheduled to go live yesterday, and, well, things happened, and I didn't make it, and he was waiting for me, and I was embarrassed. Let me tell you something, everybody. I talk about vulnerability and talking about your weakness. I didn't want to tell Dave what really happened, but I did, and here's what he said to me. He said, "We are all imperfect human beings," and that's the kind of guy Dave is, and so welcome to the live stream, Dave Scholten. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I was just riffing offline with you, and I said, how do I show up today with a baseball cap and prize fighter gloves or something? I don't have that body you have. But listen, you were born in Hamilton, Ontario, and I think you're living in Cabo. Is that correct?
Yeah, living in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, it looks like a cool place you have there. Well, Dave, we talked a little bit, and how we connected was just simply you observed my show, and we found there's some threads in our stories, man. I have a lot of respect for you already. Don't know you that well, but hey, take us back, Dave. This is about the hero's journey. Age 50, you're looking at going back in as an MMA fighter, but I always say that there's something rooted in that. What happened to you, or where did you come from, man, to get into MMA fighting? Take us back as early as you want. You lived on a 30-acre farm.
Yeah, basically grew up in Ontario on 30-acre farm, like you said. And yeah, my dad made me work really hard. He was in the military in Holland, and he was very strict, and a lot of times too strict. And but it made me tough, no doubt. But sometimes it wasn't the most healthy way of raising a kid, I don't think. So I've learned a lot of my journey. And at 15, moved out to Vancouver, BC, and that's when I luckily got into wrestling. And Jim Domke saw me as the smallest guy in the school wrestling the biggest guy in the school. I think his name was Gordy Fulton, and him and his all the other teachers were in the lunchroom watching us wrestle. I didn't know this, but I guess he saw a skinny kid that didn't want to give up, and that wasn't afraid of a bigger guy kind of thing. So he came up to me. I was a greasy-haired, skinny kid in grade 9, and he said, "Hey, you got to get into wrestling." I hardly talked because I was dealing with a lot of abuse at home, that sort of thing. So he got me in the wrestling. I think that pretty much saved my life or altered the course of my life. So big shout out to Jim Domke. He's one of my heroes.
All right, we'll make him an unsung hero. Man, you got me going there, Dave, about the early back years. I mean, you know my story. My dad was a commanding officer in the British and then Canadian forces. And when you talk about strict, dude, I mean, we would go in the garage and clean up the garage at home, and the average buddy of mine would be in there for an hour sweeping. We'd been there 8 hours. And I think I knew my timetables in school before anybody even knew what they were. And of course, then came my mom, and she had the wooden spoon, right? So my dad would be at cadets, and my mom would say, sit at the table and do your drills and whack if you didn't get it right. But you mentioned tough growing up in that environment. It made you tough. Something happened, though, early in your life related to your dad. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happened, from what I can remember, it's 3 or 4 in the crib, right? I would pee the crib and I'd be getting suffocated in my own urine in the crib. So that's my first memory.
Wow.
And my dad was like 250, 6'2". He was a really, really big guy. So basically, make a long story short, fast forward to when I was 16, he almost drowned me. And I almost died that day. And that was very, very traumatic. So I moved out of the house at 16 because I knew I could die if I stayed in that household. It's fight or flight, and I chose flight because he was such a big, scary man, and he grabbed the rake and chased me around the house sometimes, and he had mental issues, right? And that's why I just want to say, hey, thanks to you for raising awareness also for mental health. And I did mention a family friend, Mauro Ranello, and his YouTube documentary, The Bipolar Rock and Roller. He talks about it too. He's now pretty famous and did the last Mike Tyson fight and the Floyd Mayweather Conor McGregor fight. He announced that, so he's raising a lot of awareness too. And and now Simone Biles in the Olympics, timely enough. It's great on her. I have so much respect for her, and she's a world-class athlete. And it just shows everybody has battles. When you get cut in your arm and it's bleeding, people are going to walk up to you and help you. But a lot of these people suffer in silence, and my dad was one of them, and he ended up killing himself because of it. So, yeah.
Well, Dave, take a breath there. First of all, man, love you and your story. I honor you, dude, for sharing it publicly. I mean, you get on a mic and you're sharing, and the world's watching, and to be vulnerable with a painful story. I read in your bio notes that your father tried to drown you in a creek that ran through the front of the house. I didn't know the back part about the crib, but dude, that's horrific. And one of the things I learned from my own experience was that in the first 10, 15 years, everything the brain sees and hears, it just buries it as fact. And then you spend a lifetime trying to get past that. It's funny you said about your buddy there, the bipolar rock and roller. I like that handle. I did watch his video and love to get to know him. Yeah. He, Dave, I talk about this on the show. If you go to the archives, we're approaching 200 episodes. As a guy who started a show just to do something good, I had no idea. But Dave, I've got people lined up for months just wanting to get on this. And when I look at the archives, I go, wait a second, 80 to 90% of people in the world are like us, dude. If you listen to Oprah, she says 90%, but they've got some broken backstory. And yet for a long time, I felt there was something wrong with me and I was a minority. And I did look at some of your video about when you were doing wrestling, and you're pretty amazing. And I wouldn't have thought that you had that in your backstory. So let's go to the how. I mean, why MMA fighting? And you got into that. Some might say, hey, sometimes that's a tough sport to watch. Maybe there's a bit of violence in it. I mean, why MMA, and what drove you? Why that?
Yeah, I just want to touch on what you just said. Just a shout out to anybody that's listening too, that's struggling, just to speak up. And that was my toughest thing. For 40 years, I never told anybody the things I'm going to tell you now. I wouldn't tell my best friend of 25, 30 years. So, but yeah, I mean, I got into wrestling, and Mauro, actually, Ranello, after my father had hung himself in a tree, killed himself, my sister got murdered. She got stabbed by her ex-husband. He killed her and her new boyfriend. So that was a long time ago. That's why I'm able to speak about it now, because I've dealt with the trauma and worked my way through it. And as you mentioned, what you were talking about is inner child, right? We're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So you work through that inner child, because at the end of the day, we're all children still inside. And, we don't really want to lose that, the lust for life and all the great things about children. And but wrestling, because of Jim Domke, and then Jake Uzinga, another great coach of mine who's now in Washington State at a university teaching football. Another shout out to Jake Uzinga. And the wrestler I looked up to, Corey Quack. He was a Canadian champion, and I'll never forget watching him and looking up to him, and then having someone to look up to and have a goal to become like Corey Quack, a Canadian champion. So once I got into wrestling, Mauro Ranallo, I fought so much on the street because I would fight bullies. I would never look for a fight. I would never pick on someone smaller than me. But if I saw anybody acting like a bully, you know, the typical drug dealer guy or tattoos walking through the bar like this in a small town that would be, you know, pushing people or being disrespectful, I would be the first one, the small guy, to say, hey, man, have some respect. And that would always usually enter into a fight. So I would be fighting bullies. And now because I study psychology, looking back, I was actually fighting my father, people that acted like my father. So bullies, I couldn't stand bullies. I hated bullies. So I would fight so much. So fighting became so natural to me. And I was good at it. I've never been knocked out in my life. And Mauro would jump up and down in my mom's house because Mauro was a DJ in Abbotsford at a place called Animals. Jamie Dahl owned it, a friend of mine, and he would be the DJ. And then when my sister got murdered, he fundraised for my sister's 3 kids because now my niece and my 2 nephews, they never had any parents. The mother's dead and the father's doing life in prison. So I was like the father figure, and then they got adopted by a Christian family in Abbotsford. And so Mauro became like really good friends of the family. He actually announced me in wrestling back in the day. So he sat in my dad's chair for the next 8 years and became best friends with my mother. So then wrestling, I was number 1 in Canada 3 years in a row, set for the Olympic trials. And then I got in a car accident, flipped over 5 times, end over end in my Fiero.
Wow.
And I had punctured lungs, and I was choking on blood in my chunks of lungs. I was in the ditch, knocked out, and I woke up. And then I remember a crowd of people around me asked me what my name was. I said, Dave Scholten. And they said, when were you born? And I couldn't remember. So It was a concussion. So to answer your question, after that, I just gave up wrestling and then got into MMA because Mauro was like, you're meant for this. You're meant for this. But I never really took it seriously. I just used my natural ability. And now I'm very focused, and I'm making my last run to make it to the UFC.
That's amazing. First of all, I didn't know about that, the accident. I think I picked up the concussion thread, you know, my story, falling in a bathtub in 18 and still working through that. In fact, as I talk to you now, I've got double vision. They gave me these funny glasses. If I take these off, Dave, the gap between the left and right eye is about 6 centimeters. So just want to tell you, you look like there's 2 of you. It's scared the hell out of me. Okay. But I mean, when you get concussed, you don't know the journey. And I started thinking about that in sports, how many athletes get knocked on the head and don't know the consequences. And one of the side effects I didn't anticipate was mental health. As I said in a TED talk I did, I had my first suicidal thoughts. I had second ones, which was really thinking about my daughter, who's 23, hanging by herself by a rope in her dorm room back on the other side of the country. And I learned, Dave, that I didn't know this, man, but suicidal thoughts aren't just about killing yourself, but you can have thoughts of other people harming themselves. Just the brain was just doing weird things. Everybody, we're talking to Dave Scholten. He's a legend in my mind. I got to tell you that, you know, if you haven't seen the beginning of this, go back and watch it. But if you think your life's tough, Dave started on a farm in Ontario, Canada. His father had a mental illness, tried to drown him, and one would say maybe hurt him throughout that early part. His dad hung himself from a tree and took himself out. Dave's sister was murdered and her new boyfriend. And then Dave decided, instead of letting that define him, he decided to let it shape him. And yet, can you imagine, everybody, with a mind that's polluted like that, how Dave got into the field of wrestling, rolls the car, concussion, and then again, you're looking down squarely at the barrel of a shotgun. What's the purpose and meaning of my life? Dave, was there ever a moment, especially after the car accident, or let's be real, man, because you're no BS, Dave, here. Every day in my life is a journey. I wake up and there are some days I don't know what the future looks like. Some days you have this fight forward and some days you just want to quit. How do you keep fighting forward? And then MMA, you're looking at age 50 to go back into that. Tell us, what are you doing mentally to prepare for that?
Yeah. Well, just so you know, I've been training for about 5 months, 6 days a week. So I'm actually in training camp, and I'm probably going to fight in the next 2 to 3 months. I'm just going to select the organization, and it'll be an organization outside of the UFC. I'm 9 wins, 4 losses, so I'm looking to pick up 2 or 3 more wins and then knock on the UFC's door or Bellator and take it from there. But sorry, what was your question, Tom? My apologies.
Yeah, the question was after the car accident, and then just I was saying that
Oh
there's
yeah.
some
I got
days
it.
we wake up,
Yes.
people, you wake up and you just want to fight for it. Some days it's a battle, and the truth is most people don't realize. I'd like to know what you say, that
Yeah.
we're never perfect and okay. There's always that battle against the demons, the voices. What do you do? You're prepared for MMA, but what do you do to keep fighting forward mentally?
Yeah, basically for me, like I like to help others through trauma and struggles, and anytime I can, I like to, give advice from what I've been through and that sort of thing, and always remembering that there's always people going through a tougher time. I mean, if you one of the books I recommend is Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, his whole family got taken out by the in the Holocaust,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And there's always somebody with a worse story. I mean, I could have been born in Africa and died at 4 years old of starvation. So what drives me nuts in society are these complainers and whiners, and they don't realize all you need to have is gratitude. So to answer your question, I wake up every morning and I just try to remember I have 2 hands, 2 feet, and I have gratitude. I'm breathing fresh air. I could be living in a big city in China and in the smog, with 1.2 billion people and a communist government like that. So it's like, take a look at how fortunate you are. All you need is health, a roof over your head, and food in the fridge, and air to breathe. Other than that, everything else is a bonus. So a shout, the thing I want to say to people out there is, I can't stand complainers and whiners. So have gratitude for what you have. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I love it. I'm just going to read this off a piece of paper here. You mentioned advice, everybody. That was a teaching moment. Go back and listen to Dave again. He just said it. Dave's no BS. I love that. He don't be a whiner. Don't be a complainer. Dave, I learned that too, that we have a choice. We can choose the thoughts that we want to have. That's the power of the brain. And yet there's so many people get stuck like us who are whiners and complainers. This is what you wrote. Follow your passion, work hard, keep your true circles small, surround yourself with positive energy, protect yourself with boundaries. Man, I should tattoo that on my forearm. Those are great words of wisdom. Mixed martial arts, tell me a little bit about that. I have a general understanding. Tell me about the sport and anything else.
Yeah, so basically about mixed martial arts, when it first came out, I wasn't that into it. I had a guy named Chris Nicholson that invited me over to his house in Abbotsford at UFC 1. It's like, Scholten, you got to come see this. You got to come see this. And I went and saw it, and it's a 400-pound guy against a 170-pound guy, and this karate against a wrestler and different styles. And it was interesting, but I just didn't have any rules, and I didn't really like the sport. So then he called me again on the next one, and I didn't really like it. And then it kind of grew on me as I understood it more. So I understand people that don't like the violence and stuff, but it's controlled and nobody's forcing us into the cage. So it's more like a chess match, and it's a competition, and they have so many safety standards that it's a lot safer than boxing. In boxing, you get knocked down and they give you a standing 8 count or 10 count. And in MMA, it's over as soon as you're knocked out. They call the fight or tapped out, and you get to tap out. So it's got a lot of rules. So when it started, you can do anything, but now it has a lot of rules. So it grew on me. And then, like I said, Mauro was like, Dave, you're meant for this. You're meant for this. And that's how I got into the sport. So
that's pretty cool. I want to ask you about why you're doing it. I think I know the answer, but there are 2 types of people that I've learned. I'm going to use me as an example, follow my sword, Dave, that I was climbing the ladder of success, always needing to win awards and achieve things. And somebody said this to me, that when you're in the room of your mom, you have everything you need. You have safety and warmth, and you're enough. We're born happy. And then the world convinces us in order to be happy, we need to do more and achieve more. And then we get layers coming into our life storylines of the things you went through and I went through with my dad. And I was searching for the love and really appreciation of my father. That was a big thread of why I was doing what I was doing. Today, I just want to give this to you, man, as a sharing from me to you, that now when I do something, if I stepped in the ring for MMA, it's with a very different purpose. It's not because I'm trying to patch up something missing in my soul. You seem like a guy who's really got it together. So why are you doing this? Why isn't enough?
That's a great question. That's what a lot of people ask you. Why, man? Are you crazy? That's I've been called crazy many times in my life. When I jumped on my motorbike from Vancouver to Argentina, 32,000 kilometers, people call me crazy. Going through Nicaragua, El Salvador. But you had a couple good points there, Tom. And people have to realize the day you were born, you were enough. Okay, that's number one. The day you were born, you're enough.
Yeah.
So we have to unlearn all these things you were talking about, Tom. We have to unlearn all the bullshit that society puts on us, that you have to have this and you have to do this and you need all these accolades and things like this. But you don't. You just need to be a good person, help other people, and the world would be way more better off that way. But too many people are trying to chase money and that sort of thing, and it's kind of sad because there is enough food on the planet for everybody, but everybody's not eating because it's so unbalanced. That top 5%, the corporations, the banksters, and the government, and all this corruption and religion gets intertwined. So like you said about your mother, everybody wants to be loved. So that's the main thing. You got to live with love, and you learn that along the way. And why am I doing it now? Well, I was a victim as a kid, so I fight for children for the last 5 years. I want to raise awareness against child sex slavery. It's real. And could you imagine? I don't have kids, but can you imagine having kids that are forced into sex because it makes money? Well, guess what? It's happening in every country. US, Canada, Cambodia's horrible, India, and they get shipped to different places and promised different things and then get locked up in a room having sex with men with money, 10 to 50 times in a day. It's disgusting. Yeah. And if I'm going to live for one thing, it's going to be protecting innocent children. So.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Dave. It was in the notes. I was going to get to that. The mission, I wrote it down as, everybody just listen to Dave. He's taken his mess, turned it into a message, and he's got that mission there. Dave, it makes me sick when you talk about the way children are treated like that. And, you've done some world traveling, man, and especially with your fighting that you've done. I think I read it that you're an avid traveler, something like 50 countries. Maybe that's it. Tell us about one of the craziest stories while you were traveling, anything at all, just to give us a perspective through your eyes.
Yeah, I mean, when I was riding, I guess I'll just tell you a story about when I was riding to Argentina. I was in the mountains in Peru, and I think it was Peru or Bolivia, but the altitude was really high, and I'm going through the mountains in this crazy road with all these turns, and it kind of throws you off a bit, that altitude. And I've got my leathers on, and it was kind of cold in the mountains. And then I was passing this big bus, and there's a corner not too far ahead, but I took the chance, took the corner, and all of a sudden, I don't know, it was a patch of water or something, and I slid in the bike. I slid and hit into a barricade. If that barricade wasn't there, the cliff was like, I don't know, 100 feet down at least. But basically, make a long story short, it was that curb that saved me. So that was the one crazy wipeout on my story. But other than that, I had no issues. And people ask me, because I've been to, it's actually over 50 countries, they ask me, what can you tell me about traveling and life? So what I say is that people are inherently good. Now, you wouldn't think that if you watch the news, because it's like a train wreck. Everybody wants to look at the train wreck. And that's sad. I don't really watch the news because it's all negative. And I put in good things, like Tank Good News on Instagram as an example. And I try and stay away from social media because I think it's becoming a sickness to a lot of people. And I want to talk to the younger people about that. I'm very passionate about that. But I recommend stay away from the news and put in good information. And you are what you put into your head, right?
Yeah, you're talking to the converted here, and it's funny because when I work with others, especially people in leadership, they what they do with their last hour of the day is just sad. The news on the cell phone and negative energy. You really get it, man. I was thinking about the worldview. You have a worldview. I mean, your memoirs are going to be some, but for a guy like you who's traveled, everybody, you got to get to know Dave and reach out and learn, because you bring us perspective that, even going to India, Dave, that's my roots, but I've never been there. I just did an interview with a fellow who was from there. He said, he went and wept. It brings you perspective when you see what you see on the street there. It's kind of funny. I was watching a cooking show. It's one of my passions, as you probably know from following me. And they took us, they took the travelers doing the show into a place where all these women were cooking, and they were in poverty. And they asked the lady who was leading the conversation, if you just picture all these old women in saris, and there's some young of them, and they're cooking, and the place is hot, and they're all smiling, Dave. And the interviewer said, where did they come from? And she said, many of them were found on the side of the road. And man, my heart just, like, I literally melted into this emotional puddle. And I'm thinking, holy crap, can you imagine in a country of billions of people that you're born and you get lost on the side of the road, and you spend the rest of your life, cooking, but as you're doing what you're doing. And then she said after that, they put them in a home. They have a compound set up where they age. That's their life. But these women are smiling. And I thought about what you said. They don't know what they don't have, and they choose to be happy. So we really can learn from you.
That struck a chord with me, Tom, because they're probably a lot happier than I heard a story the other day, and obviously I'm not going to mention any names, but a very wealthy person that I was told through a very, very good friend in Cabo here that they were thinking about taking their life, and he's very, very wealthy.
Yeah.
So money has nothing to do with it, or status, or none of that. It's all a hallucination. And the thing that I can relate to about what you said about those ladies in the kitchen, I sometimes see that too. I see, an older person working in behind a kitchen. They're smiling, and I walk in a little grumpy or whatever, and I'm thinking, man, this lady's happier than I am. And then I do a check with myself saying, why is that? So I was in Africa, and I'll never forget, I was sitting there watching these kids at a school rolling these bald tires, and they were laughing and smiling, and it's etched in my head. I'll never forget it. And I was just watching how happy and joyful they were. And like, we can learn so much from kids, and that's why I love nature, kids, and those are the things that, and animals. Those are the three things that I really focus on in life, and that's what makes me happy. Animals, nature, and children. Because what happens to us adults, don't ask me. But I'm sorry, but those are the beautiful things in life. But I'll never forget that in Africa.
Well, everybody, a teaching moment from Dave on the show. Children, animals, and what was the other one? Children
Nature.
And nature. And it's funny you say that, because when I reflect, we live in, well, Dave's a Canadian, you know where I live, and around the Burrard Inlet, there's a lot of trails. Probably some of my happiest times just in nature. And I know that kids have a childlike way about them. And when you hang around my granddaughter, you just see them. They're innocent. They don't have this use of the rational brain. So they just don't know what they don't know. And, they say if you want to find your passion, go hang around kids. It's amazing to me. Dave, I want to go back as we're heading towards the last part of the segment of this amazing interview. We'll have you back to talk more because there's so much we can learn from you. I want to talk about our fathers again for a minute. I know it's not always an easy subject because they're both gone. Mine passed away January 18. My dad was 22 years dry from alcohol with AA, but I had this huge gap in my life. I purposely avoided him. And you just quickly, to keep the spotlight on you, we heard about how your father passed. He committed or took his life by hanging himself. My dad had an unexpected heart attack, but I think my dad through his life had some form of mental illness. His father was a alcoholic, and so what happened was a few months before he passed, I think God, I'm a faith-based guy, God sent me to connect with him, and I did at a coffee shop, probably after a decade and I was somewhat feeling shame about not respecting him. Kept him from my daughter, and there's forgiveness and all this stuff and tears, and then I said, tell me about granddad. And what I learned is his life growing up was like his granddad. He got pushed off a bridge. That's how he learned to swim in Fiji. My grandfather was a very bad alcoholic who died in the house from alcohol poisoning and probably didn't treat my dad well. And then I thought about that. And so I turned.
What year did your dad die? Sorry?
What's that?
What year did your dad die?
In January 2018. It was just
18. Okay.
Yeah, just 6 months before I had my fall in the bathtub there and got my concussion.
Wow.
But what's interesting, Dave, is I was able to, there was forgiveness, but I was able to understand the roots of my dad's life, which allowed me to change. You brilliantly taught us the mind. So this is what I say now. The gifts I have today, the ability to, for example, do something for 8 hours at a high level, outworking everybody, comes from what my dad taught me. I just couldn't see it back then as good. So what's the gift in all the mess? What's the gift that you've taken out of your father's life?
Okay, well, you made a good point. I just want to say very, very good point. You never know what somebody's going through. Always remember that. You know, if somebody gives you a bit of an attitude at the till when you're checking out the grocery store or something, you don't know if their dog died, if their mother died, your dad died, like you, that sort of thing. So you had the knowledge and the thought process to think, well, let's find out where my dad came from and my grandpa, right? So my grandparents got the door kicked down by the Nazis because they came and stole all the pigs from their pig farm. So I did my research and that sort of thing. So always try and understand that other people everybody's got a story. Trauma is trauma. You know, it's the same thing, whether it's big or small, it's still trauma. It still affects people for the rest of their life. One person mentioned a story about a fear of heights, and I was just wondering why, and I knew there was a trigger, and then that person told me their dad held them by the ankles over a 14-story building.
Oh my God.
And that sort of thing. So, I mean, the great thing about the internet, and I know I'm not a big fan of social media because it's just highlights and it puts people into feeling bad about themselves and it's not reality. But one good thing is about the information out there. So Psychology Today is one of my favorite websites, and I've learned so much from that site. But basically always remember everybody's going through something. So try and keep that in mind. And you mentioned about weakness. So I wanted to let people know about my weakness. Because I had so much anger against my father, I was 100 pounds when he almost drowned me, and he was 250 pounds.
Wow.
So I had all this anger. So I took that on the wrestling mats, but that anger also came with impatience. So, to anybody in the past where I've been very impatient or anybody I've hurt, an apology to anybody. But it's been 40 years, over 40 years that I've never opened up. And I do know, they want to film a documentary on my life. I'm talking to Netflix and a few other private companies that are interested in doing a documentary. So I'm ready to move forward. They're filming a trailer right now. But I know I have a story to tell, and I have to give a shout out to Roy Duquette. He's the one that got me to open up. Roy Duquette owns Olympic Gym in Vancouver on Commercial Drive, a great gym.
Yeah.
He's fixed it up really well. And He's the owner, a great guy, very, very successful, and a personal trainer, a body like Olympus. He's got a strong man and a smart man, so I respect him a lot. But he was the one. He invited me out for coffee, and I thought it was random because we didn't hang out too much, just working out and stuff. He said, I want to take you out for coffee. And he said to me, he goes, Dave, I tell everybody about you, but nobody knows who you are. And I said, I don't give a shit. I grew up on a farm in Ontario. I don't care if anybody knows who I am. He goes, Dave, I'm going to tell you something, not as a friend, but as a neutral person. He goes, your life isn't 1 in a million. It's 1 in a billion. And then it made me sit back and I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he was like, well, Dave, you've never done drugs. You've never had an issue with alcohol. You started your company, over 25 years ago. It's still in business. You had your thing with your dad, your sister, and you became the champion of Canada. And he started listing off these things. And for me, I've lived it. So to me, it's my normal. So Roy was the one that actually, made me realize I have a story to tell and I can help other people. And then I met Sean Danica, my success coach. And another shout out to her. She is a very, very smart girl. Sean, Sian, Danica. And the business of you, that's her business. And she really changed my frame of mind to live more through love and that sort of thing. And about feminine energy and all that kind of stuff. I've been working on that instead of, the alpha male sort of thing that I grew up fighting as a tough guy and all that kind of stuff. As you get older, you learn, you can help other people. And Sean Danica and Roy Duquette are two people that have really helped me out.
Yeah, when I watch this back, Dave, as we produce it, we'll be doing a international podcast and then a second production, a YouTube premiere. It's going to be epic. My mind's going on a journey in many places right now, and this happens when I have an authentic guest, so like you, that tells stories. You don't have an ego, man, but I didn't know who you were. I heard the name and I kind of looked you up when you and I connected. But that's the thing I love about you, Dave, man, is that it doesn't matter. The people who the world doesn't know, they're the real ones. They're the ones people everybody knows are the ones who are bragging about themselves. And they say that when you tell your story, tell it to the tribe that deserves to hear it. And there's millions of people, Dave, out there that want to hear your story. I think your memoir and whatever you do, dude, will be very well received. We'll be there in the front row to help you and promote whatever you do, because we're on a parallel mission.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I was also remarked at the fact that you just took us through your life, no drugs, no alcohol. Amazing. I'm looking at all the things that you can teach people. When I struggled, I turned to a bit of drinking. My dad turned to alcohol. So we can all learn from you. What's that one thing that gave you the resilience? I think that's why you're a champion. And I really see something in you that is so obvious now, Dave, on the interview, that you have this mastery of controlling your thoughts. You just really understand that, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing that I feel a connection with you, Tom, just because everything you're saying are things that I talk about. And then you've interviewed so many people and you understand life like a lot of people don't, because you're delving into people's lives and you're getting tidbits of information. So you just said another thing that I'm a huge proponent on. The biggest thing in life, mastery of self-control. And if you can control your emotions, you can control anything. And this is the biggest message I'll tell anybody. Some people look at me as a mentor and some younger people. And one girl the other day, actually, I said to her, listen, when I got in trouble in my life or any problems I've had, it was when my emotions got out of control. So that's about controlling your emotions. If you can control controlling of self and emotions, you can control anything in this world, and anything's possible. So you don't think people are laughing at me that I'm trying to make the UFC at 50? I was pretty close 4 years ago, and then I had some friends like Dennis Kang, who's had probably about 30 more fights than George St. Pierre, and he was interviewed. And 4 years ago, when I was getting close, I was training with, I remember Sarah Kaufman, the best MMA fighter in Canada on the island, and I took the ferry across. And when I got into Tsawwassen, I got rear-ended by a semi-truck. So that ended my run 4 years ago. But at davescholten.ca is my blog, and that's where all the MMA community and guys like Colin Danes, an Olympian, and Kelly Lockbaum that played for the BC Lions, they're all, talking about my character, and they've known me for over 20 years, all of them. So that's why I have that blog. So anybody that is interested in following my journey, it's davescholten.ca. You can click on the blog, and my training videos will be on there, and information.
That's amazing, Dave. We'll put that in the show notes, and I'll be sure to pick up all the names you mentioned. If, with your permission, we'll put those in there to honor all your mentors. I wanted to mention a couple things about mentors as we move to the last few minutes here. That I lost my father when I was 12. I think that's when he left home. And they say many who lose their fathers or mothers, we go out, we find other mentors. The mentors I found in the business world, the high ego executives where I grew up, they weren't really mentors. Many of them covered up their vulnerability. They thought, what are they going to think of me? The real mentors are the ones I meet, like you, people who share and have the backstories, and they're proud of it. And the fact that you've done something with this, Dave, to help others, being in service, I think that's really the biggest lesson I learned from today. I want to honor you with a few leadership words. I write these down as I'm doing this. Those watching the video will see me on my paper here. The first one is mental toughness. You are mental toughness, man. I can feel that, see that. 2, you're real. You know that. You don't come across as a guy who's just telling a story for ego. 3, resilience. I think there's a picture of you in the dictionary under resilience. But each time you said something, there's another story. Rolled the car, got rear-ended, ended. And you just never quit fighting forward. And that is really the biggest part of this story. And the 4th one is humility, Dave. I was going to say, take your shirt off and show us what a prize fighter or somebody preparing for a fight looks like. But, here's Dave. He's got a nice casual shirt on, and, you're not bragging about yourself. So I think that's pretty awesome. I'm going to induct you into the Quiet Warrior Tribe, and then we'll give it back to you for the last word. So you're getting an award today, Dave. I think you might have seen this, but I'm going to put me on the screen here. And so if you just take a look at the screen backdrop there, that is a challenge coin. Challenge coins were created in World War II. They were created to build community, Dave. And so I had this vision of this show. I didn't know it would go the way it did, but I wanted to bring together quiet warriors, people like me, who work quietly around the world with their purpose, taking their mess, turning it into something passionate. And they showed up with no BS. And when you receive this coin, Dave, you become part of the Quiet Warrior Tribe. I think we're now in over 15 countries. Very few of these go out a year. And we're all connected by that single thread, man. And together, I call it a superpower. Just imagine when you look at the show archives, all the Quiet Warriors you're connected to. So congratulations. I hope to meet you in person and give you this. Otherwise, we'll get it to you. Welcome to the tribe.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And what a great vision. And I can imagine 10 years from now, Tom, what you're doing and where it's going to be. So that's awesome what you're doing. And congratulations to you for just starting small, just like Joe Rogan. No different.
Yeah, that's right.
You're a guy, no, Joe Rogan's the most famous podcast in the world. And you know why? You hit the nail on the head. He's real.
Yeah.
That's it. When everyone's talking about veganism, all this stuff, he's talking about how he eats meat because he doesn't care. He says it the way it is. And that's it. And that's what people like.
That's
people
right.
like real people. So after my fighting career, which will be shortly after 50, making my run at the UFC, I'm going to be a motivational speaker. And yeah, the quiet warrior, I've been very quiet and to myself, and I realize now I can't be as quiet. And, my nickname from some of my friends is Anti-BS Dave, as you know, because I don't like bullshit. And where'd I get that from? My mom. She taught me all the things, in sales, on sale, and 30% more, and all the bullshit in this world we're conditioned to buy. So a couple things to end off would be, first of all, parents, please put your kids in the sports. It saved my life, saved my trajectory. If they have high energy, you don't give them pills for ADD and all this kind of stuff. You let them use their energy somewhere. Or arts, put them in arts or sports or something that they're passionate about that they like. If you see them, latch on to something, then put them in that sport or in that activity. And last but not least, parents need to be held accountable. I'm sorry, their kids on their phones, they have to put limits where their phone has a lock on it after a certain amount of period, like an hour, 2 hours, whatever they want, to each in their own. But I'm sorry, all these kids, they're going to be going down an unhealthy path on their phones with no connection. And like you said, walking out in nature, that's why people feel so good after going for a walk in nature and stuff. So those are my last words, and I hope you follow my journey at davescholten.ca, and I look forward to being a motivational speaker, and I will be doing a TED Talks also, Tom, so I'll be following your lead.
That's fantastic. And if you're looking for a stage, hit me up, but I'm sure you'll find one. I think the word thought leader, and Dave, if you have time on, I believe it's Friday, I'm doing another live stream and being interviewed on what is a thought leader. And I think that's what we're hearing from Dave. He's going to become a thought leader. There's much to that. And I believe, Dave, you're right on. You need to go there. I'd love to stand on a stage one day side by side with you and trade stories. And you did it again, man. Every time I want to wrap this up, you say something and my brain goes over here. So because we're live and we have the benefit of extra tape. When you early in the interview and everybody go back, it's a teaching moment. You talked about, you never picked on anybody. You never fought for the sake of fighting. You stood up for bullies, or you stood up against those being bullied. A friend of mine, he's a fellow author, wrote a book, and he asked me for a quote for the cover. And I said, learning to stand up to a bully is the first step in learning to stand up for yourself. And when you said that, man, it just took me back. I was bullied as a kid for various reasons, color, skin, size of my body. And there were guys like you in the schoolyard, man, who would be standing there laughing and joining in. And yet you would stand up for me. So I love you, man. And on that note, everybody find this amazing interview. Give the YouTube channel a rating and subscribe to it so you can get the release of this video when it comes out. Find the Quiet Warrior Show on your favorite podcast channel, and we'll be releasing the international podcast to honor Dave's story. And live like Dave does with the true passion. Find that purpose. Live life that you deserve and desire. Hey, Dave, thanks, man, for being here.
Thanks for all your work, Tom, and good luck with your show in the future. And hopefully we'll connect again, and I'll check out the live stream on Friday.
All right, brother. Thanks, Dave. See you again.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca